Hey, beauty friends, it's Meredith from Beadalon and Artistic Wire. Welcome to class today. Today we are going to be doing a necklace slash bracelet, right? A two-in-one wrap necklace slash bracelet. And we're also going to talk a lot about design today. What I did is I took a design that Sarah Lovecraft had actually prepared for our class today, and I broke it down so that I could reteach it on her behalf. And as I was breaking it down and looking at what she did, I saw how cleverly she designed it. Because if you signed up for this class, or you're looking at the necklace that was the inspiration for the class today, it's at first glance, it's an asymmetrical design. There are lots of different beads, there's lots of different things going on, but the reason why it works is because there's symmetry in the asymmetry, right? Stay with me. I hope that you will believe that and stick with me for this journey of designing. And of course, we're going to learn how to make a dangle with a knotted head pin, and then we're going to have a little refresher in crimping, because can't we always use a little refresher in crimping techniques? So this is going to be a big class talking about color and pattern and design and some of the things that run through my head as I'm creating something. Sometimes I'm like, I see something, I want to make it, I'm making it. But other times I'm inspired by a color palette, or I'm inspired by a photo or something that I've seen, or even inspired by a bunch of beads, but they haven't quite told me how they want to go together yet. So what I would love is everybody who is here in the comments, help me, help you, help me. I would love to know, kind of as we're going along, please chime in and let me know if one of the design elements resonates with you, or it inspires you to think of something a different way. For those of us who are in the live class, we're going to have a little bit more interaction, I'm hoping, than perhaps sometimes we usually do. And for those of you who are joining me afterwards on the replay on the Michael's YouTube channel, please feel free to think about these things on your own. And if you are inspired by something, definitely post it on your socials and do a hashtag, make it with Michael's, and then also a hashtag with Beadalon, because we both at Michael's and at Beadalon love seeing what you're making. So I think that is enough out of me for this camera. Let's go ahead, Lindsay, and take the overhead camera and start talking a little bit about the materials that I'm going to be using in class today. So you can see here on my bead board, I've got a lot going on. And if you look on my Instagram photo that I posted before class at Meredith Joy Designs, you can see that there was a lot more going on before. Like, this is the after, this is the cleaned up portion. I know it does not look very clean, but as we're going through, you'll kind of see how and why I organized everything the way I did. And interestingly, I have started using a bead board a lot more often than I have in the past. And I have really enjoyed using it, especially for a design like this. And it has really helped me get my head around this project and how I want to teach this project today. It's always a little challenging teaching somebody else's project, but I'm very honored to have the opportunity to teach one of Sarah Lovecraft's projects, because she inspires me all the time. And so it's nice to be able to take that inspiration and flip it around. Now, for the class materials today, I'm using different beads. And that was one of my biggest challenges this morning, but also something that I want to talk through a little bit, because you can see that the beads that I chose, and I've already strung up half of this design, are similar to the beads that Sarah used in her design, but they are different because that's what I was able to substitute from my stash. And the lesson that I want to really, really drive home from this is, oftentimes when we see something that a designer has made or an instructor has made, we feel like we need to recreate that 100%. But in fact, by substituting other beads for it, you might find that you like the project or the end design even better. So always in my classes, I always try to encourage people to substitute, to work within your stash, to work on your skills and making sure that your crimping is good and your wire wraps are good, but also to have fun and don't get hung up on replicating something exactly. So if you are looking at the instructions, the first thing that Sarah has done is actually made a knotted head pin. And she uses the 22 gauge wire for this. And of course, that's my favorite gauge of wire to use for a knotted head pin as well. So that's what we are going to use first. We'll also need for this project some beading wire. So which beading wire did I use? I actually used 49 strand 018 beading wire, but you could almost use, I'm trying to think, almost use any beading wire for this. An 018, an 015, and 024, all of those diameters would work. I tend to go up when I'm using beads, especially beads from Michaels, because the bead holes tend to be larger on Michaels beads. And as you know, if you watch them and play along, you know that you always want to fill your beads up, the bead holes up as much as possible with your beading wire. So 018 is a good place for me to be today. And of course, I'm going to use the number 2 crimp tube because that is the corresponding crimp tube for the 018 wire. And I know that because my handy dandy label here tells me so. All right, so beading wire, crimp tubes. We're also going to need kind of the general things that you need in when you're doing beading. We're going to need some jump rings, maybe. I haven't gotten that far yet. I'm going to use this toggle clasp that I had here in my stash. And we will also need round nose pliers, chain nose pliers, a cutter, all of the normal tools that you should have at your disposal. Okay, so let's go ahead and just start with that knotted head pin. So to make a knotted head pin, for anyone who doesn't know how to do that, I'm going to show you. This is one of my absolute favorite things to make. I saw this technique from an artist who had posted it in a YouTube video. And gosh, it was years ago that I saw this video. So I always say I don't take credit for coming up with the technique, but I do take credit for showing everybody that I possibly can how cool it is. So I'm going to just start with a length of wire. This is way more than I need. 4 inches is just fine. And I'm going to use my round nose pliers, right? Because I'm making something round, I'm going to use round nose pliers. And what I want to do is I want to take those round nose pliers and put them on the very, very tip of the wire. Okay, so nothing's coming out here, nothing's coming out here. It's a very, very tip of the wire. And I'm going to rotate a coil, not a spiral, but a coil. And I'm going to rotate that around 3 times. So that's 2 and then 3 times. Okay, so it's a coil, not a spiral. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to push that straight up. Okay, now I can remove it from the pliers. And what I do is it was kind of facing this way. I'm going to flip it over so it's facing this way. I'm going to hold that coil in between my thumb and forefinger. And I'm going to thread the end of my way too long wire back through the coil. See how I do that? Okay. And if you've never done this before, I would suggest practicing on 24 gauge wire before you really get going with it. Because 24 gauge wire is thinner than 22 gauge and will be a little bit easier to do. Now what I'm doing is I'm taking my nylon jaw pliers, I'm going to hold them in my non-dominant hand, and I'm going to pull gently but firmly with chain nose pliers. And you can see that end there tightens up into a little knot, right? So super fun. Also, when you use the 26 gauge wire, that little knot is a little bit smaller. So sometimes it depends on your aesthetic for how long or how big or how little you want that knot to be. Now you can see again, remember how I said I have way too much wire here? I'm gonna go ahead and cut that. I don't know why I cut so much. It's feeling ambitious. So now what I want to do is I'm going to make a dangle. So Sarah had used a really pretty pearl or freshwater pearl in the shape of a cross. But what I'm going to substitute for that, I'm actually going to use a couple of beads. So I'm going to use just a little 3mm kind of squared off rondelle. I'm going to use one of the barrel beads from my design. And I think that might be it. I think maybe I'm going to go with another one on the top. Yeah, that looks balanced. And that's one of the things that I'm going to talk about and kind of go, oh, what do I think? A bunch of times in our tutorial today, because I did that a lot when I was creating this project, is seeing if things looked balanced, if they looked if they looked right. There's really no other way for me to explain it except that they look right. So now we're just going to make a really simple loop, right? So we're starting off our project with a simple head pin and a simple wrapped loop. I'm going to bring this around. Everyone does this a little bit differently. I like the push and pull technique. When I'm using 22 gauge wire, I find it a lot easier to kind of do more of a wrap around. I'm going to snip this off here. And of course, I want to come in at the very end and tuck in my end. All right, so now we have our little dangle that will be super cute, both in the back of our necklace, but also when we make it into a bracelet. So I'm just going to put that aside on my bead board and bring my bead board back into my workspace. And now we're going to talk a little bit about length, right? So for this necklace, what I did is I took a tape measure and I wrapped it twice around my wrist. So first things first, to kind of figure out how long I want to make this, we're going to go around twice. And I do want to mention, we are in southeastern Pennsylvania, and we are having some significant weather right now. And I am looking out my window and it is pouring. There is a possibility that I will lose power. And if I lose power, I will lose my computer and I will lose my internet. So I'm not quite sure from Michael's perspective how we are going to fix that problem. But if that does happen, I will apologize right now because it's a possibility. We sometimes do lose power during these events. But I'm gonna power through and hopefully we'll be able to we'll be in good shape. Okay, so my wrist twice around is 14 inches. Okay, so 14 inches is a very small choker. Okay, so it will fit around my neck. If you can see me on the overhead camera, I am taking the tape measure and putting it around my neck just to see what 14 inches looks like. It's going to be really, really tight. Okay, so how I'm going to kind of mitigate that is, all right, well, I can go around 3 times on my wrist. So 3 times on my wrist, no, that's only twice. That's not gonna work. Let's actually go around 3 times on my wrist. So 3 times on my wrist is going to be about, let's say, 20 inches. So 20 inches is a pretty legit length for a necklace. That's actually a really nice length. The other thing that I can do is make my bracelet, instead of being really tight, a little bit looser, right? So that will yield me about 14.5, 15 inches, which is a little bit better for a necklace, but still pretty short. So just some things to think about as you're designing and figuring out what your length is going to be for your 2-in-1 wrap necklace / bracelet. The way I have it laid out, I'm going to do that very very tight choker. I think it's very on trend these days. And so that is what I am going to do for my wrap. Keeping in mind that my toggle down here is probably going to add about an inch of extra space between when we get the crimp on here and the toggle part. So something to think about also. So again, when we're designing, there's a lot to consider besides just the shape of the bead or just the color of the beads and really like what beads we're using. So looking at Sarah's design, she has this one big focal in the center. Down here a little, just a little bit, and you can see my little measuring tape here. It's invaluable to have a little measuring tape right here. You can even take a ruler and tape it down to your desk if you don't have this measuring tape. But I have here that focal bead, and I really struggled to kind of figure out from a from a proportion perspective, how big I wanted this to be. It's a little bit bigger than I want. I'm going to admit that it's a little bit bigger than I would want. But again, I was kind of making a lot of substitutions. And I think in the final analysis for the necklace part, I'm really going to enjoy this larger piece, especially as it's a choker kind of sitting right at my clavicle. So one of the things that I noticed as I was breaking down this design is I looked at it at first and I wish I had it with me so that I could show it to you. But I don't. So we're just going to kind of make do with what we can. The thing that I noticed is even though it's asymmetrical, there is symmetry in it. So I'm going to try to replicate that in my design here today as well. So what I did, like I mentioned, I did 1/2, and my 1/2 is a little bit short. So I am going to lengthen it at the end, and we're going to talk a little bit about that as we get there. But what I really like that Sarah did is she used these daisy spacers. Let's see if I can get, oh, look at that focus. These daisy spacers in really interesting ways. This large bead is, oops, sorry. Let's see, move it down here. It is 10, I'm gonna go with 15 millimeters, 14 or 15 millimeters is the largest bead. Okay, so now where we have, and you can see that I did do a lot of substituting here, is, and actually now that I'm noticing it, I want to take this off and add just one other bead. I actually ended up restringing some of this and I missed this one here. So I'm just going to fix that real quick. Okay, so we use these daisy spacers, which are one of my favorite spacers to use. And you can see my nails are just a little bit too long today. So it'll be fun watching me struggle to pick up beads. It's always something, right? All right, so we have this nice big, it's probably like a 14 or a 16 millimeter bead. It's nice and big. And so what I want to do is I want to both do a similar and also a little bit different design here. So keeping in with what Sarah did, she kept it pretty similar for until about right here, actually, up through here. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so I want to make sure, let's see, somehow my daisy spacer disappeared. So I'm going to do another one. These little guys are tough to get on. So again, as we're designing and as we're figuring things out, oftentimes the beads will speak to me and tell me where they want to go. But it's also interesting to look and kind of see, to think about proportion and perspective. Okay, so I'm looking along on Sarah's design to see what I want to do next on this side. So again, I did 2 here and then another daisy spacer. I love how there isn't a spacer in between those 2 gold beads. Now we get to the point where I want everybody to see what's going on, but I also sometimes will bump my camera more than I would like. So apologies for that as well. So where did my, oh, here they are. And you can see also, I'm going to bring this back a little bit. What I did with my bead board, I really used it as an organizational tool. Whether or not I actually stay this organized as my organizational tool is really up for discussion. But I have kind of the different clusters and different beads that I'm using or considering using for this project in different compartments and different spaces on the bead board, which is why a bead board really is a great tool and why I am starting to use it more and more. Okay, so let's see. So now we are here and I did this one that I'm substituting, and in my brain, I'm trying to remember all of this, the beads that I'm substituting for which beads. I'm putting on some 8mm rondelles right now. These are from those great cards that Sarah and I love to use that have the 3, or it's actually, I think it's 4 different strands of these cut crystals. So I have these 4 here, and now what I did is I actually changed my color to use these rose gold beads. So one of the things, if you guys know me, you know that I am often very hesitant to mix metals, and which is why this is another great project to challenge me not only to substitute materials, but also to mix metals, because I wanted to at least keep my beads in the spirit with which Sarah has made her design, right? So in keeping with the spirit that Sarah made her design, I really stretched my comfort zone in all of these different metals. So I have silver, I have gold, I have rose gold, I have this like bronzy copper color going on. It's a lot different than I tend to design. But why, again, it's so interesting to kind of take an idea that somebody else has come up with and use it for my own. Okay, so now I am just stringing up here. I am picking my rose gold beads, and when if you see the beads that you like, they will jump out at you, hopefully, on the beading wall when you go to Michael's. And let's see. All right, so we're going to keep on going. I believe that there are 6 or 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so far we're pretty similar and pretty symmetrical in our design. But then things start to change, and I love it. I love that things change, especially if we are going to be using this as a wrap bracelet, because it will become such a fun and dynamic design when it becomes a wrap. Now I'm looking, why is there such a shadow there? This is one of those times where I'm paying a little bit more attention to the beading and a little less attention to the screen. So let's change that. Let's pay a little bit more attention to the screen. So I'm going to put in another daisy spacer. And the fun thing about these daisy spacers is you can really put them anywhere. And again, in this design, they're not in between every single bead. There are some of these clusters of beads where there are no daisy spacers. Okay, so let's see what's coming next. We have, so I substituted in these 6mm, these 6mm beads. So we're going to go ahead and do 1, 2, and 3, because on one side there are 2, 4, 6, and one side there are 3, right? So this is the side that I did the 6, and now this is the side that I'm going to do the 3. It's opposite from what the photo is, so I guess if we wanted to, I could do it like this, and that might be a little bit clearer. I just find that I work better. I guess the way that my brain is set up, I work better when I'm doing it on this side rather than on this side. It's also easier with the camera. But since we're doing the design, I will flip it over. Okay, so now we have another design here. She had used these really pretty blue with the gold beads, and I have substituted out the barrel beads that are kind of this antiqued patina, but I need to substitute out over here another bead. And I think actually what I'm going to use for that are, where did they go? These wood beads. So let's just see. Let's see how we like how that looks. Okay, so we're doing a lot. We have got a lot of different colors. We have a lot of different textures in here. And now we're adding something else to the mix. We're adding another texture of this wood. And I think I want to, well, no, we're not going to use another daisy spacer because Sarah didn't use another daisy spacer. So I'm going to go with these wood beads now. So again, a very eclectic, very non-Meredith design, but I'm kind of digging it. And I think that this really is a great fall color palette. Even though we're trying to hold on to summer for as long as we can, I feel like I try to hold on to summer as long as I can, completely all throughout the year. But let's be honest, friends, it's coming. So it's good to kind of think about that as well. All right, so let's see. Now what we have to do, because we're starting to get to size, right? So let's bring this up. Let me make sure I'm nice and framed. And here's where our bead board comes in very handy. So I'm just kind of tightening this up and putting the beads into the channels. And I want to make sure that that big bead is down at the 0. Okay, so let me see if I can maybe get this a little bit more centered for you. Okay, so my big bead, my focal bead is at that 0. And now because I want to make my necklace a little bit longer than 14 inches, because again, it's going to be a short, it's going to be a choker kind of necklace, but also going to wrap as a bracelet. So up here to the 7 is where I want this side to be. And up here to the 7 is where I want this next side to be. So one of the cool things that Sarah had added to the end of her design is this dangle do, right? So, so we are going to do the same. So she added 2 of the spacers. So I too am going to add 2 of the spacers. And then where did my dangle do go? It's right up here in the channel. So I'm going to add my dangle do. And just as a little aside, first of all, I did a wrap loop. Second of all, I did not use a jump ring because I want this dangle do to be secure. If I used a jump ring, maybe I didn't close it quite as well as I could have. Because the beading wire is so thin, there is a great possibility of that jump ring coming off. So that is why I almost always will use a wrapped loop whenever I'm attaching any dangle do's to beading wire. So I have my dangle do on, and then I'm going to do 2 more of the daisy spacers. And then because, well, for a couple of different reasons, but I want to make sure that I end with small beads because, excuse me, first of all, I need to make sure that my toggle clasp will both open and close. But also from a design perspective, I just think that it looks nicer to have your design come to a smaller ending. And I think because I've done so much asymmetry, I need to go back to the symmetry of the one side. So I'm going to put my bead stopper back on. And I'm going to pull this out. to right there so we can really see what's going on. So we have a design that is both asymmetric in this part here, asymmetric in terms of all of the different mixed metals that we've used, but because we've kept certain things symmetrical, it works as a design. It's very interesting to me. And again, outside of my comfort zone. But now we're ready to go ahead and crimp, right? Super easy in technique. So sometimes things are difficult in technique, like if you're doing a very complicated seed bead design, but easy in beads because you're only using, 3 colors of seed beads. This is easy in technique because all we're doing is crimping, but much more difficult in design because we really had to think about where we placed our beads in order to make them look like they weren't placed so particularly. So I'm going to go ahead with a size number 2 crimp tube, because remember that is what my beading wire told me. Got to listen to your beads and also listen to your beading wire. So I'm using a number 2 crimp tube, and I'm going to take half of my clasp, thread it through the wire and back around and through. And then of course we are going to take our crimp tool. Where is my crimp tool? Here's my crimp tool. And I want to make sure that I'm using the standard crimp tool, not the mighty or the micro, but the standard crimp tool. And I want to come in here, make sure that everything is tightened up. Let's get a little bit more slack here so we can see what's going on. I want to make sure that everything is tightened up to about 1/4 of an inch or a centimeter of, or 2.5 centimeters, 1/4 of an inch of wiggle room. You never want this to be all the way up here. You always want a little bit of wiggle room between your clasp. And as much as you can, you want to really try to make sure that those wires are not crossing in the crimp. They will always want to, but you want to try to make sure that they are not crossed. Just kind of hold them with your thumb and then come in here for the 3-step crimping process. And again, oftentimes people will skip this first step. Is it the end of the world? No. But does it make it for an easier crimping situation? Yes. So I'm going to come out in here in that very first notch and press it down. I'm going to come back here in the back notch and turn it into a crescent. And now if I wanted to use a wire guardian for this project, I certainly could, because of the thickness of this particular clasp. The wire guardian might not have enough room to really what's the word I'm looking for, to function properly. I generally tend to use wire guardians, but in this case, I just didn't. Maybe we'll add one on the other side just so that I can show everybody what the wire guardian looks like. So this is a little long, so I'm just going to snip that off. But I'm still leaving about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to tuck that wire into the beads. Hopefully it will fit nicely into all those beads. So this is another reason why I love all of these beads from Michaels, is that the holes are big enough so that the wire will just go back through and be hidden. All right, so now I'm going to come down here. Oftentimes in that step, my wire sneaks out, but it didn't in this case, so yay me. Let me get some of these beads out of the way. And now I'm going to come and I'm going to do that same thing on the other side. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to come down here and I'm going to use my wire guardian and I'm going to hold it right tight against that last bead. Because now what I'm going to do, and I generally will do this before I do any crimping, is come in here and just make sure that everything is good, that I did all my measurements correctly, that the bracelet isn't going to be too big or too small. Again, I like my bracelets to be a little bit thinner, but or I'm sorry, not thinner, a little bit less dangly. So let me also go ahead and check and see just how tight this is going to be as a choker. Let's move my hair out of the way. And this is why we keep a wire guard or a bead stopper on, so that it doesn't fall off. And it's going to be tight. Let me see. I have to move my little notification out of the way. Oh, but I think that that's actually, I really like that. It's really good length for Zoom calls too, right? When we want to make our necklaces short so that everybody can see us on our Zoom call. I think it's going to be good. All right, so again, just those little things that you want to do to double check. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go on this end. And I had way more beading wire than I needed, which I generally will do because it's better to have a little bit more beading wire than to run out of beading wire, especially when you're teaching classes, right? All right, so now I'm going to use a wire guardian. So for those of you who don't know, a wire guardian is this little horseshoe shaped piece of metal. And what that does is it provides just a little bit of extra abrasion resistance against your clasp. It also makes sure, oops, I need to make sure I put on a crimp bead or crimp tube first. It also makes sure that you have the exact right amount of space as your wiggle room. And also it looks nice. So those are the three things that I think are the three reasons why using a wire guardian is a great idea. So I put on my crimp tube. Now I'm going to come through here and string on the wire guardian. I'm going to come back around that horseshoe shape and come down the other side. And then let's see how this is going to work with our clasp. Yeah, it's not so bad, right? Not bad at all. So we can go ahead and use that. What I always recommend, and not everybody does this, but I always recommend coming in here and just squeezing the ends of the wire guardian together. It helps everything. It helps with crimping. It helps with it looking nicer. It's just what I do. And I'm going to thread this through a couple of beads here, pull everything up nice and tight. Now, before I crimp this, one of the things that I see people do a lot when they are crimping is to make sure that they tighten everything up as tight as humanly possible so there's no wire at all in their beads, but when in between their beads. But what ends up happening is your necklace will become really stiff, especially if you have beads that have flat sides abutting each other. So like these beads here, what you want to make sure that you do is before you tighten everything up, put your necklace into here. I'm going to move all of this out of the way so we can see what's going on here. You want to put your necklace into a coil, because what you want to do is build in enough room for your beads to be comfortable. You don't want them all scrunched up, all smushed up together. You want them to be comfy. You want them to be able to kind of shake their shoulders out and move around. One of the questions that we always get at Beadalon, or one of the statements is, well, my necklace broke. Why did it break? And one of the almost always answers is because you did not build in that wiggle room in between your in your wire. So what ends up happening is that there's too much tension, and over time the beads will want to be free. The beads will want to escape, and so it's actually putting so much pressure on the wire that the wire will snap. So you want to make sure, good jewelry design, you always build it in so it has room to move. And so now we have done our second crimp and we're ready to try it on, and to, fingers crossed, hope that it fits the way that we like it to. And indeed it does. See, now that is perfect for me. I don't want my bracelets to go down any further than my wrist bone here. So now I'm happy. I'm pleased. I'm really excited about how this wire, or how this design turned out for me. So let's go ahead and just show it really quickly so you can see both the symmetry and the asymmetry of the design. So lesson learned for Meredith, super fun to go outside of our comfort zone, right? To design something a little bit different and something that we might not necessarily always go to for our go-to design. So I'm going to go ahead and try it on as a necklace now. That's going to be the real test to see if this fits me as a necklace. It's definitely a choker. I have some kind of channeling my inner 90s child here, but I like how at least in terms of when it's as a necklace, it's actually symmetrical, right? So it's kind of like a little secret that back in the back behind where my hair is down, that's where that asymmetry is. And one of the last things that I just want to touch on is comfort in jewelry. I try to be very cognizant because I'm very particular about how things feel on my body. And whereas somebody else might not mind having something that's a little scrapey or a little scratchy as part of their jewelry, I am very particular about that. So when you're doing your designing, you might make something and it might feel not good on your body. Well, then you know, and you learn that from next time, that perhaps that particular toggle clasp or those particular beads are a little owie on your wrist or on your neck or on your ears or on your ankle or anywhere. So that kind of comes with just trial and error and learning and seeing if something is better for you or not better for you. And I'm also thinking, I don't know, it's just, and again, I don't generally wear things that are so tight around my neck. So it's a little, I can feel it. I can definitely feel it. Usually I have my neck, my pendant that I wear all the time, and that's nice and loose and drapey. So this might take a little bit of getting used to, but if I made it longer, then it would come down a little bit further. Will I like that? I might not. So again, it's always a learning process, and there's always something to discover and something to challenge yourself with outside of the box. And I certainly have done that in this project, and I challenge all of you to do that as well. So I think that's it for our project for today. Thanks for hanging out with me. Thanks to Michaels for hosting Beadalon, for classes in the community classroom. And of course, thank you to Yvette for doing such a good job keeping up with all of my craziness in the comments. Thanks everybody so much for participating today and for hanging out. Our classes that Beadalon does for the Michaels Community Classroom are generally on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock Eastern time. And our Saturday classes are also at 2 o'clock Eastern time, but keep in mind, keep in the back of your head, we're actually going to be switching in a couple of months those Saturday classes to 1 o'clock. Last thing I'll remind everybody, if you make this project or make something inspired by this project, make sure that you post it on your socials and hashtag Beadalon, and also hashtag Make It With Michaels. If you want to hang out with me over on Instagram, you can find me at Meredith Joy Designs. I try to be pretty good about posting things. I'm not always great, but I'm trying to be better. And that's it for me today. Everybody be safe if you're on the East Coast with all these crazy storms coming through. And that's it for me today. So until next time, happy beading.